Well, time now for Campaign Chronicles, France 24's regular countdown to the presidential election. Well, I'm joined by our media editor, Olivier Salazar-Winsper, who'll be dropping in with all the reactions in the press and on the blogs a little later. Hi, Olivier.
Hi.
Now, before that, it's just 2 weeks to go now before round one of the French presidential election, and the official campaigning's kicked off this Monday. Now, candidates are now finally able to advertise on television and put up posters. But like everything in the French campaign, every second of that airtime's regulated to make sure each of the 10 candidates gets his or her fair share.
French radio and TV stations are bracing themselves for the headache that is France's official presidential campaign. Until now, broadcasters were required to give equal airtime to all 10 candidates, regardless of their political weight. To comply, they often aired rallies and statements of less important candidates late at night. But with just 2 weeks left before the first round, France's broadcasting watchdog is stepping up the constraints. Now stations will have to give all candidates equal airtime in comparable airing conditions. That means candidates with just 1% in the polls will get exactly the same visibility as the front-runners. Starting Monday, French audiences will also discover the traditional candidates' campaign ads. These clips follow strict rules just like official flyers and posters. Candidates can't use the 3 colors of the French flag or EU symbols. Each candidate is allowed only 2 posters, whose size is also predetermined, 59.4 centimeters by 84.1, and that can only be put up in specific areas determined by local authorities. But while political exchanges on television and on the radio might become a little muted in order to comply with the rules, the debate rages on in the press and on the internet, where the rules don't apply.
Now, for more on this, John Gaffney joins us now. He's a professor of politics at Ashton University in the UK. John, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us. Might some candidates not find some benefit, actually, in the flexibility available prior to the beginning of official campaigning?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, this is overseen by the CSA, the Audiovisual Authority. It was set up in the 1990s to ensure fair play. And in fact, as your reporter said, that it is essentially aimed at giving proper airtime to all of the candidates. And most of the rules that are in force from today until the 21st of April have actually been enforced from the 20th of March. But in fact, they're not applied as rigorously as they are from now on. That is to say, as your reporter said quite rightly, that in fact, a lot of these clips, a lot of the coverage would be of the smaller candidates or the less interesting, or what the journalists think might be the less interesting candidates being shown at 4 o'clock in the morning. But from now on, it is true that the overall coverage will now be slightly more rigid. All of these rules apply. You can't, as you said, you can't use the tricolour in the posters. They have to be a certain size. You can't even use white paper, because white paper is the official colour of government documents and so on. But the candidates will now have spots. They'll have little party political broadcasts that they can make, and they'll all be given 43 minutes each, and they can split those up into 10 times 1.5 minutes or 8 times 3.5 minutes and so on. And so depending upon how good those spots are, they might actually help the small candidates and make them more known to people. I mean, a lot of people don't know all of the candidates. There are, in fact, a lot of candidates in this election, and covering them all, 10 candidates, is actually quite difficult. So we'll see, but it will change the nature of the campaign. Although, as your reporter said, the use of the internet is a huge difference now from all previous elections. But from now on, one of the main 24-hour political news channels will be interviewing each candidate for 10 minutes every morning, as there are only 10 as it were, working days now between now and the elections.
John, I'm just going to interrupt you there, because we've also got Olivia on set here, so I just want to get her take on what's happening here. So John outlined, gave us a bit of a picture of how things are going to change now with official campaigning having kicked off. But I mean, I personally feel like I've heard a lot about campaigning for the last couple of months.
Well, it's like we've heard from the report, and like John reiterated, now it's much more official and it's all set out incredibly fairly. So you're going to see exactly the same coverage of each person. You won't feel that, for example, Sarkozy or Hollande is dominating in what you see on television. We've just actually seen the first spots after the evening news on television. 10 candidates picked in a random order, back to back, giving their political messages, a party political broadcast, as it were. And the criticism from journalists and some viewers, if you want to make a criticism of this information, is that it's just not very dynamic. It's a very restrained format. They have to just give their message. They've got very restrained time and little room for making anything creative or stylish, as you see in other elections, for example, in the US, where the budgets just go through the roof, and they can also, time is controlled, but the way they do things is less controlled than in France.
So now just having a look at the evolution of the campaigning, an issue that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere, and that is a possible reform of the French driving test.
Yes, Nicolas Sarkozy has suddenly decided to bring in the driving test and the acquisition of a driving licence into the campaign debate, which, like you said, came out of nowhere. He gave an interview on Sunday to the Journal du Dimanche, saying that he wants to make getting the driving licence and the driving test more accessible, cheaper, cut down the wait between retaking your test, because he believes driving is a life skill that everyone should have, namely because it can get you a job in the future, that young people need life skills, and learning to drive could lead to better employment prospects, which I found quite strange. But even more strangely, a lot of the candidates are on board with him. François Hollande echoed this sentiment, saying that driving could even be taught in high schools. Nathalie Arthaud, who's the candidate for the Lutte Ouvrière, the Communist Union, reiterated this, saying yes, the state should pay for it, it's too expensive, it's too complicated for families from kind of modest backgrounds. So everyone's pro getting your driving licence at school, which for me, I think I'd still be at school if that was part of my qualification.
Now, do you think that that the French electorate actually has become, today's official day of start of campaigning, have people started to become bored by by what they've seen so far of the candidates' messages?
Well, you wonder if these issues are just coming in to keep everybody's attention. People are talking about the driving test today, which then led to other media stories centred around what's called the highway code in French. There's a story, actually, once this driving test issue was launched, there were a lot of reactions on Twitter, people saying, what next? Are we going to have a debate about the level of chlorine in the swimming pools? And you wonder if these are just tricks to get people interested in the election again. And Sarkozy was actually found, as part of this story, to be speeding on the highway by a car magazine, doing 200 kilometres an hour. So I think the media is doing everything it can to keep people interested.
John, quickly before we go, how with the sudden the sudden rigours that are going to be imposed on the campaign, on candidates campaigning from today, how does that compare with systems in other European countries?
Well, they all have their rules, but it is actually the case that the French rules, in typical French manner, are incredibly to the letter, and the media actually find this whole thing a bit of a nightmare. The French media find this a bit of a nightmare, actually knowing how do you make sure that you give absolutely fair coverage to all the candidates. But it would have been good if there had been more debates, and there was almost a debate scheduled between all of the candidates later on this week, but it actually, because of a whole range of disagreements between them, they've actually been cancelled. So, but we shall see.
Thank you very much. John Gaffney joining us there from London, Professor of Politics at Aspen University, and of course our very own Olivier Salazar-Winsberg. Now remember, you can follow the entire French presidential campaign on our website. We have a section dedicated to the elections. Participate in our polls and see what hot topics are up. But do stay with us. More coming up here on France 24.